Now, generally, we dive right into the message right here, but we do have one more thing that we're going to do before we get to the message, and just have an announcement to make. And likely many of you have already heard the news. Jacob and Maddie are transitioning. Jacob's been our youth pastor he's in his 5th year right now and have served this church very well. And they have some other things on their heart. And so I'm going to have Jacob come real quick, and he's going to share about that, and then I'll catch you up on some details, and then we'll jump into part 3. So give it up for Jacob, our youth pastor.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. Yeah, so we're transitioning, and about a year ago, about the time we became pregnant with Theo, really started thinking about and dreaming about our future just as a family and what was next for us. And so even for me, just trying to think through like, all right, so how long do I see myself being a youth pastor? Do I want to be an associate pastor at some point? Do I want to maybe be a lead or plant a church at some point? And was really kind of praying through all of that this past year, and ultimately just kind of came to, I don't think that's what I want to do, at least not in the near future. And so that then kind of led to, well then, like what else would I do? This is what I've been working towards since I was 16, and so it's been a long time. And so was trying to just, think about and pray about something that would be kind of in my gift set and my personality would fit me, and ultimately decided to become a teacher and to go into education. And so that's what I'm working towards. That's what I'm doing. I've been working on my master's in elementary education the last couple months.
Come on.
At Grand Canyon online. So kindergarten to 8th grade is where I could teach, but I'm going to be trying to become a middle school teacher. And so even for me, and how you can be praying for me, and Maddie and Theo, is for me, this is kind of like my mission field. Like I feel like my prayer is just like, Jesus, put me in whatever school you need me so I can be a light, so I can be really a disciple who makes disciples. And so that's kind of my heart wherever I end up. It's not just to be a teacher, but to be a light in that place. And so also, around that same timeline, we were thinking about Theo and just none of our families around here. They're all in the Seattle area. And so we were also just, family is so important for us. And even both of us growing up, we were so close to our cousins. My cousins were my best friends. And so we kind of want that for Theo as well, for him to grow up with his cousins. And even around Christmas time, there are so many traditions and things that our families do that we were like, oh man, like Theo wouldn't get to be part of those. And so that definitely played a part of it as well, just Theo getting to be around family. And so, yeah, definitely been one of the most difficult decisions we've had to make as we've been praying about this last year. And a huge part of it is because we love our Canvas family and we love you guys so much. And so it's been just an honor and a joy to get to be the youth pastor these last 5 years. And Nate, I just want to say I love you and Maddie and Theo, although Theo doesn't know it yet, but he loves your family too.
It'll come in time.
It'll come in time.
Yeah.
It'll come in time. So we just love you guys so much, so deeply. And so a lot more I want to say, but it's not goodbye yet. So I'm gonna hold off a little bit. But yeah, that's what's going on.
Well, Jacob, I want to say, and we'll talk more about this in a couple of weeks, but just want to say thank you for the way you've served our church and our community. You've done it with competence. You've stepped into roles that were bigger than you, and you just got after it, and really appreciate that. And I am excited for the next season for you guys. And as hard as it is to see you go, whenever somebody's stepping into what Jesus has for them next, we will champion that every day, all day long as a church. So, man, we still got a couple more weeks, so we'll save goodbyes for later. All right. Thank you. They have been an absolute gift to our church, and as you heard, in a couple of weeks. So on Sunday, May 7th, will be their last Sunday. So we have a couple of more weeks with them, and this is what I want to encourage you as a congregation to do in the next couple of weeks and then beyond, is to continue to pray for the Cormier family. Got a lot of plates spinning right now, a lot going on. So just be praying for them as they make this transition. And also, if you see them out in the lobby, man, go out of your way, share with them what their impact on your life has been along the way. I know that always means so much to people. So just take the time and say thank you for all that they've invested. And again, on May 7th, we will celebrate them as a church. But until then, we're going to keep hanging out and having fun doing that. All right, friends, well, we're jumping into part 3 of our Red Letters series. We kicked this off on Easter Sunday. Really, the premise behind this series is very simple, and it's this, that if Jesus didn't come back from the grave, there's no need for us to listen to his words. In fact, we should just reject them wholeheartedly because he would have been a liar or a lunatic, is what C.S. Lewis would say. So there's no reason to listen to what he had to say. But history tells us there was an empty tomb. The scriptures tell us it's because the power of God raised Jesus back from the dead. And if somebody dies and 3 days later they come back, it should make you want to lean in and listen to what they have to say, right? Like you have a friend who makes an audacious claim, and you say, well, why should I believe you? And they say, well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to die. And then 3 days later, I'm going to come back to life. And then they come back to life. That would make you lean in and listen, wouldn't it? Absolutely, it should make you lean in and listen. So that's what we're doing throughout this series. We're just leaning into the words of Jesus because we believe the scriptures are true. We believe history is true as well. There was an empty tomb. Scriptures say it's because the power of God raised Jesus back to life. So we're leaning in and listening to what Jesus has to say. That's why we entitled this series Red Letters, because there are many translations of the Bible out there that painstaking work has gone into writing all of Jesus's words down in red. They're called the Red Letter Edition Bibles. I have one right here with me. So that makes it easier work to jump into the New Testament. Most of Jesus' words are going to be found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are the first 4 books of the New Testament, what we call the Gospels, just 4 accounts of Jesus' life from different perspectives. And that's the bulk of Jesus' teaching that we find in the Red Letters. And here's our hope. Like, we're just lay it out there open-handed. This is our hope, that everybody starts wrestling more with the red letters that Jesus has. Whether you're here and you're not yet a follower of Jesus, or you're here and you've been following him for decades now, we should all continue to wrestle with the words that Jesus had to say, because there is life and there is power in them. In fact, while Jesus was walking this earth, he made an invitation to everybody, and he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my teachings are easy and my burden is light." And that's the Nate Day paraphrase version. But at the end of the day, what he's saying is, I have a different way to live life than you're currently living. And if you would enter into relationship with me, I will teach you how to live that life. And that, to me, is very intriguing. It's very compelling. It makes me want to lean in and see what Jesus has to say. Now, as I was preparing for this week's message, I thought back to the week before Easter, and I realized something this year that I've never known before, is the week before Easter, I make really bad decisions. I had bad communication along the way. I made some bad decisions along the way. One of them ended up costing us like 3 hours of our lives. I got home from work, backed the truck into the garage, very professionally, I might add. I get out, I start to walk up, and there's a guy who's approaching, and the guy had a super cool mustache. It was one of those that twists out like that, you know what I mean? Like, his mustache alone made me want to talk to him. So I said, "How's it going?" He goes, "Pretty good." He goes, "Are you the owner of the house?" I said, "Yeah, I am the owner of the house." He goes, "Great. Have you ever thought about solar?" I said, "No, I haven't." And he goes, would you want to learn about solar? And my mind was saying, no, you don't want to learn about solar. But my mouth was saying something different. And I think it was his mustache. As my mind was saying no, my mouth was saying, sure, it would have to be a pretty compelling pitch for me to get interested, but sure, I would love to hear about solar. And as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, no. He goes, well, you got a half an hour? I come in and set up, and it might have been that night or maybe the next night he came back. I don't remember now because it kind of blurs together, but nonetheless, it wasn't a half an hour, by the way, but the guy was super cool, like great conversation. He walks me through all of the stuff that comes to solar and, the carbon footprint and all of the things, and in my mind the whole time I'm thinking, I want to know what it costs. I just want to know what this thing costs. And of course, they're not going to give you that information. You got to come back for another visit for that information. But I was so interested in how much this stuff costs, I invited him back for another go around. And he comes back, and we're jumping into the conversation. And right out of the gate, he goes, okay, if numbers make sense tonight, we're going solar, right? And I said, well, not so fast. I need to know what it costs. The whole time, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? There's another shoe gonna drop, and when it does, it's gonna lay out the cost for me, and then I'll know if I'm going solar or not. Well, ultimately, we're not going solar. Yet. When the other shoe dropped, it was a hefty shoe. And by my math, which you guys know, math in the moment for me is not my strongest suit, but by the math, it was going to take me roughly 18 years before I paid that thing off and started to make me money. I thought, that's a long-term investment for this guy. I am just not that risky. So ultimately, we said no, but I was just waiting for that other shoe to drop. What is this going to cost me in the end? When we jump into the text today, I just want you to know right up front, the other shoe's about to drop. Because we're going to wrestle with some stuff that Jesus has to say that ain't none of us in this place are going to like. But this is what I love about Jesus. When you start reading his words, you recognize that Jesus never sugarcoated following after him. He never front-loaded the conversation with all of this wonderful stuff. And then when you're so excited and you're ready, and then all of a sudden the other shoe drops, Jesus was very clear all along that to follow after him was going to cost you something. And the cost that we're going to double-click on this morning can be summed up in this one simple statement. And here it is. Love is a non-negotiable. If you're taking notes, I encourage you to write that down. It's not that difficult, so you might be able to remember it throughout the week. And that is really our hope, is these short little summary statements are statements that you can remember throughout the week so that as you go through your week, that you continually come back to Jesus' words, this message, and see how it will challenge you throughout the week. Again, love is a non-negotiable. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 21 here in a second. And Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, this is what's called the Sermon on the Mount, what's been named the Sermon on the Mount. This is the most comprehensive teaching that Jesus has given in one setting. And he runs the gamut on the teaching. In fact, if you're reading the words of Jesus, this is such a great place to just camp out for a while because it really helps you understand what it looks like to follow Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus, the kind of life that he calls us into, the way that our lives should change because we're following after him. Like, it just runs the gamut of topics. I encourage you, jump in and read it. Now, what we're about to cover, Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 48, in it we find 6 antithetical statements that Jesus makes. They go like this: you've heard it said, but then he'll follow that up with, but I say. You've heard it said, but I say. And Jesus isn't contradicting the law inside of these statements. What he's doing is he's correcting a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, and or a misuse of the law. So people were taking the law as we do as people, and they were molding it and shaping it to fit their own needs and their own desires rather than letting the law mold and shape who they are as people. We're guilty of this today. So this morning, we're going to take 3 of these 6 statements that are closely related together, and we're going to let Jesus challenge the way we live based on what he has said here in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. This is what it says. And you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. So the underlying thing here is you can do everything except for murder people, okay? That's the no-no, but you can nudge all the way up to that line, but don't you dare step over that line. Don't kill people. Okay, verse 22, but I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of hellfire. Jesus is taking people on a progression. Starts with anger, you hold on to anger, and you are subject to judgment. Meaning, you haven't yet sinned. As we well know, anger is an emotion, generally a secondary emotion that just comes on you in a moment. But the question is, what are you going to do with your anger once you feel angry? Are you going to hold on to it? And if you do, likely you're going to be on a progression that it shows here. And the consequence of the progression fits the problem, right? The anger. You get angry, you start calling names. Your names leads to trying to publicly defame somebody. You're really trying to defame them in front of people. You're trying to degrade their name. You want to make sure that everybody knows what's wrong with this person. Like, that's the last point that Jesus is making, is if you go to that place, you're in danger of hellfire. And then we're going to jump over to Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. And here, Jesus is quoting Deuteronomy 19:20 and through 21. And this is what's called the law of retaliation. The law of retaliation. And this is what it says. You heard that the law says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. I told you we weren't going to like this text this morning. This law of retaliation was being used in a way that it was never meant to be used. People were using it as a reason to get back at others, but the law was initially written to prevent the natural law of escalation from happening. You know the natural law of escalation if you've ever had children in your home. One kid takes a toy, the other kid throws a fist, the next kid throws a foot, right? Like it just keeps climbing. And the law of retaliation was put in place saying that the consequence has to match the injury. If an eye is taken, then an eye is given. You can't escalate the punishment. There was this guy that I've been friends with for a long time. His name's Joe Wadiga. He's got a lot of nicknames. The one that I gave him was times 10. The reason I gave Joe the nickname times 10, because if you ever played a practical joke on Joe, he multiplied it by 10. It didn't take me long to realize I don't want to do practical jokes with Joe any longer. It's no fun at all. It's just this natural progression that when you enter into a disagreement, a dispute, punches start flying, that everything starts to escalate. So the law of retaliation was meant to tamper that down and keep an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, I think it's important at this point to point out when it says if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek to them also. And this text has been used, unfortunately, at times for people to stay in abusive relationships. Like somebody is physically abusing you, and the idea is, well, I have to turn the other cheek. No, if you're in an abusive relationship, whatever that looks like, you need to remove yourself from the abuse. The reality of that text is this would have been a way to humiliate somebody in a public setting. So somebody would come up to somebody else face to face, and in order to humiliate them in front of the crowd, they would be slapped on the cheek, okay? Right hand slaps the right cheek. Bam. And what it's saying, instead of retaliating and then trying to humiliate them in public, what you do is you turn to them your other cheek and let them slap that cheek as well. Very difficult thing to do. When I was growing up, I had a pretty sharp tongue. As you might have expected, I was a pretty small kid growing up. And people thought because I was small, they could beat me up, and they were right. So you learn from a pretty early age, or not you, I'm talking about me, I should stick with me. I learned from a pretty early age, yeah, you might be able to beat me up with your fist, but man, I can slice you open with my tongue. And I get a very sharp tongue. So in a public setting, when somebody would try to humiliate me with words, I always made sure they never wanted to do that again. And Jesus is calling us away from that kind of lifestyle, where somebody humiliates us and then we turn our other cheek and say, go ahead and hit the other side. Also, back in these days, Romans were allowed to come up to any citizen and force them to walk a mile, carry my gear a mile. Doesn't matter what you were doing in the moment, doesn't matter what was going on in your world, drop what you're doing, grab my stuff, and carry it a mile. So what Jesus is saying is when they do that, or if they do that to you, this is what I want you to do. I want you to carry it 2 miles instead. Come on, Jesus. Verse 43, it just keeps getting better. And you have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, it's important to note, love your neighbor is in the Old Testament, but somewhere along the way they added hate your neighbor or hate your enemy. That's love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Love your neighbor is in the Old Testament. Hate your enemy is not. This is something they added to it, a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding, and a misuse of the law. You won't find that anywhere in the Old Testament. But I say, Jesus says, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives sunlight to both the evil and the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you only love those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are only kind to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. But if you are perfect, but you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Love your enemies. These passages have been topic of discussion likely since Jesus preached them in the very beginning. And my initial response to passages like these is to deflect. I don't know, maybe you're like me, right? You read something and you don't want to penetrate too deep, so what do? You deflect. If I can deflect what's being said, then I don't have to deal with my stuff, right? The better at deflecting I am, the more I don't have to come to terms or come to grips with who I am and what's going on in my life. And one thing that I really appreciate about this text in this passage is that it punches both the fundamentalist and the liberal alike. Nobody gets to dodge this text. This text, every one of us in this room, or if you're listening online, this text punches you somewhere in your life. This idea that I'm not supposed to hold on to anger. This idea or this reality that I'm supposed to love my enemy as myself. Like, these are very difficult things for all of us to do. There is area of growth in every one of our lives on these particular topics. And one of the ways that I love to deflect, or one of the ways that I do deflect, is by arguing the polars. Right? I read a text like this, and rather than facing my own stuff, what I do is I go to conversations out on the very edges of the conversation, places where I don't live and I don't dwell, like out in the theoretical rather than in the practical of my everyday life. In this case, the polars would be pacifism or warmongering. Pacifism is simply this: there is never a justifiable reason for using violence. That's what a full-on pacifist would say. A warmonger is they promote aggression. Nationalists are often warmongers, meaning, man, whatever does our country the best, then we are going to stick with that. Whether we have to demolish another country to get ours, then we will do that. That's warmongering. Now, thankfully, likely in this room, none of us fall into that last category, but here's a category that we might fall into: pacifism or just war theory. Again, pacifism is this idea that violence is never an option for people. Just war theory is this reality that evil exists and that the only thing evil needs in order to keep going is for righteous men and women to do nothing. I think that was Theodore Roosevelt who said that. Or here's another couple of quotes from people that might help paint the parameters for you on these two polars. Martin Luther King Jr., he said this: "My study of Gandhi convinced me that true pacifism is not non-resistance to evil, but non-violent resistance to evil. Between the two positions, there is a world of difference. Gandhi resisted evil with as much vigor and power as the violent resistor. But true pacifism is not unrealistic submission to evil power. It is rather a courageous confrontation to evil by the power of love." If you've done any study on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you know that he was all about promoting love through non-violent means. And we can agree that he did a great work in our country, can't we? Or here's the other side. This is somebody who would be very just war theory ideas. David Limbaugh, he said this: "Pacifism in the face of war is not only irresponsible, it is immoral. Refusing to meet force with force in the name of peace will beget not peace, but further death and destruction, the very violence the pacifist seeks to avoid." And here we find ourselves in between these two tensions, don't we? In fact, this message that I wrote this week, I've said a few different times now, it was a grind to write. One of the reasons why it was a grind to write was because I found myself in between these two tensions, pulling, recognizing that if it weren't for the men and women who fought in World War II, we might be speaking German here this morning. Getting that, but also saying, but Jesus' words are very clear that we're supposed to love our enemy and pray for those who persecute us. And I find myself caught in this tension. And then I was reminded, actually in our men's Bible study, of a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Eric Metaxas wrote a biography of his life, and it's called Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, and Spy. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a theologian who was alive during World War II, and he found himself in the midst of this, being a pacifist in his theology, but recognizing somebody had to stop that war machine that was moving across the globe. And if Eric Metaxas is right in his research, that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a part of a plot to take Hitler's life. So being a pacifist by theology, but in practical, got put into a scenario where he thought this was better. This would be better for humanity. This would be better for the world. And although I think this is a worthy discussion, and it's a needed discussion, like I think that we should sit around God's word and open it and talk about these polar things and let the Bible shape and mold our lives, I want to spend our time this morning talking about the day-to-day implications of this text. It's easy to sit around and talk about theories that don't put us squarely in the words of Jesus, where we have to live them out in our everyday life. So what I want to do is I want to double click on the real practical pieces, the practical implications of this text. And the clear command is this for you and I: love is a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable. The scriptures along the way are very clear that you and I, we are not to be trusted with anger. We're not. And I know that for some, the initial response is, wait a minute, isn't there a righteous anger? Isn't there a righteous indignation that we should have as people? In fact, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I taught something similar along these lines and talked about how you and I can't be trusted with anger. And a great friend of mine, he wanted to have a conversation around lunch about this idea. And he challenged and he pushed back on it, which I so appreciated. And we had a great conversation. And over the last 5 years, man, I've thought through our conversation. I've gone to the text, and I just keep coming back to this reality that you and I, we cannot be trusted with anger. Will we get angry? Yes, because anger is emotion that comes like a flood. The question is, when you get angry, what are you going to do with that anger? What are you going to do with it? Maybe if you're pushing back on this idea that we can't be trusted with anger as human beings, let me give you a few texts that you can go read this week that will help paint the picture of what the Bible has to say about it. James 1:20, great spot to read. Ephesians 4:26, Ecclesiastes 7:9, Proverbs 16:32. And as you read through that, I think what you're going to come to understand is this. Rather than harboring anger as humans, we have to learn how to hand it over to God. Harboring anger takes you on a trajectory that the scriptures speak against, particularly Jesus here in this text. When we hold on to anger, it takes us places that we don't want to go. And there's every one of us in this room, we're familiar with that trajectory. You get angry about something, you let it harbor in your heart, and it takes you places, makes you say things, makes you do things that you regret in the end. I have never, not one time, regretted handing over my anger to the Lord and saying, Lord, I want you to have this because I'm not trustworthy with it. But I could go through countless times throughout my life when I decided that my anger was justified and justifiable, and then acted out of my anger, and I was absolutely just sad at the way that I responded. I've never regretted handing it over. I've always regretted holding on to it and harboring it for myself. So we are not to be trusted with anger. You'll get angry, but in your anger, you got to hand it over. James tells us, in your anger, do not sin. What is James trying to say? Hand over your anger, because if you hold on to it, you will end up sinning with it. The scriptures are also clear that retaliation is God's jurisdiction. Retaliation is God's jurisdiction. It's not for you and I to mete out vengeance on people. That is God's business. God says that I will bring justification to this world. I will judge. I'm the judge. I do it right every time. I'm really good at it. I'm thankful that God's really good at it because I am very poor at it. So many times in my parenting life have I tried to mete out some sort of punishment, and in the end, getting it wrong all along the way, having my facts mixed up, having painted a picture in my mind that wasn't actually taken. I'm not trustworthy to mete out vengeance and retaliation. Revenge is mine, says the Lord. That's what the scriptures say. It's not for you and I to mete out. Revenge is for the Lord. Check this out. God is good at it, and he will do it. And he will do it perfectly, and he will do it rightly. And because of that, it allows you and I to be free from the need of meting out vengeance on the people around us. When we're hurt, we don't have to retaliate. What we can do is put our emotional energy into forgiving. And I know that forgiving is a huge topic, and it spans a lot of different offenses, but this is what I know to be true. Jesus says that you must forgive if the love of God is inside of you. You must forgive. You have to give it over. Forgiveness is not a light switch that you turn on and off. I either haven't forgiven and then I flip it on and like, oh, I've forgiven. It's a tool that you use sometimes on a daily, sometimes moment by moment, minute by minute basis where you say, I choose to forgive, I choose to pray, I choose to love, I choose to desire the best, even if you don't feel it in the moment. Retaliation and revenge is God's jurisdiction. It's not our jurisdiction. You see, there's this natural progression that we see here. It says this: anger leads to resentment. Resentment leads to revenge. Revenge leads to hate. But Jesus maps out a different way. He maps out a different way for his followers. It's a lighter way. It's the way of love, which is fully displayed when we love our enemies. Think about that for a second. God's display of love is on full display when you and I choose to love those who have hurt us the most. It's so challenging. I so want to dodge that at times. There's been a couple of times in my life, very poignant times, where it has taken me months of feeling like I was in the same spot, holding on to bitterness, holding on to anger, at least feeling the emotions of those things. But all the while, praying, God, take this from me. God, take this from me. One of it was when we were back in Tacoma, Washington. There was a parent of a student who had some mental health issues, and she made some threats against my family, so much so that doors are locked, shades are closed, nobody answers the phone. Like, it was scary. It was so stressful in that season that I actually ended up getting shingles at like 27 years old. 27-year-olds generally aren't supposed to get shingles. But I got shingles. And I remember in that season, I would see her car and my blood pressure would go right through the roof. I'd feel my face get hot. I'd feel myself start to sweat. And I remember one moment she was pulling into the church parking lot to drop off her son. And as her car pulled in, I knew that I was at a fork in the road. And I had to decide in that moment, what was I going to do with this? Was I going to hold on to it? Was I going to retaliate? Was I going to let my anger move to resentment, move to retaliation, move towards hatred? Or was I going to lean into what Jesus was calling me to? And I remember in that moment, simple prayer, God, I know you've called me to forgive her. I don't know how, but I submit myself to you, and I give this to you. Would you teach me? Would you help me? And then over the next several months, it was about 3 months when I finally felt like that prayer had matched my feelings, where all of a sudden I had a love and a compassion, a desire to see the best in her life be lived out. And then more recently, a great friend of mine, we were best friends for a long time, doing significant ministry together, and all of a sudden there was just a fracture in the relationship. Don't know how it happened, don't know where it came from, still am not sure. I'm still in the process of praying for restoration in this relationship. And this one took year, 14 months, almost on a daily basis, sitting in my chair early in the morning, cup of coffee, as you guys know, that's what I do. The only words that I could say is, God, I don't know what you're doing in this season. I don't know how to forgive. I don't know how to love. I'm at a loss. But here I am. And if you'd change my heart, I would sure love that. If you'd teach me how to forgive, I want to be a part of that. But this is what I know, I can't do it without you. I need you in this. Something I can't do on my own. In about 14 months after the major fracture, got some news about my friend. And the first thing that I felt was empathy. And it shocked me. I couldn't even believe it. It's like, Where did that come from? I didn't even know that that emotion was possible because of the way this relationship is going. And this is what I found. This is what I learned inside of that process, is that Jesus was doing something in the background. I didn't feel it in the moment, but continually placing myself before him, surrendering myself, handing it over to him, my offense and my anger and my hurt and my pain, continually handing it over to him. Jesus was doing something in the background. And 14 months later, I could say, man, I want the best for him. And I pray that our relationship at some point is reconciled and restoration happens, and I will celebrate the day that it happens. But this is what I know, and this is what I'm grateful for, that I have found freedom. I've found freedom inside of myself to still love, care for, and wish the best for him. So this way that Jesus calls us into, it's a lighter way. It's the way of love, and it's on full display when we love our enemies. See, laying down our offenses, letting go of revenge, and loving your enemy, it sets you free. It sets you free. If you've ever forgiven somebody, you know that when you get on the other side of forgiveness and you finally feel forgiveness, there is a weight that comes off your shoulders, isn't there? Holding on to offense is like drinking a poison and hopes that it hurts the other person. But it always hurts you when you hold on to bitterness, anger, resentment. It will always harm you in the end, and it does nothing to the other person. When you choose to forgive, when you choose to love your enemy, lay down your offense, let go of revenge, you will find freedom. It always sets you free, because when Jesus invites us into a relationship, he's inviting us in to set us free. The scriptures tell us that who the Son sets free is free indeed. And I get it. Maybe you're here this morning and you're in process and you don't feel the freedom yet. Continue leaning into what Jesus has for you. And I promise you, on the other side, you will feel freedom. It's what Jesus was getting at when he said, if a soldier comes and makes you walk a mile, walk 2 miles. You know what you're doing in that moment? You're subverting authority in the best sort of way. Meaning, oh man, yeah, I'll walk a mile. In fact, I'm gonna walk 2 miles. And all of a sudden, the authority doesn't have authority on you anymore because you've given yourself over to it. It's like, I'll give you 2 miles. Isn't there freedom in that? Freedom in that. I remember as being a carpenter in Western Washington, raining cats and dogs most of the year, definitely in the winter. And there was something about when the boss would show up on the job site, he'd get out of the truck and it's pouring down rain. He's like, hey, you guys, there's no need for you to work in this. You guys can go home if you want to. Like more times than not, one, we were poor, but the other was like, man, we had freedom to stay. And we'd say, and the attitude on the job site would get better and it would be a more enjoyable day. Why? Because we had been set free from the authority to stay, and we got to stay. We did it on our own. It was our own choice, our own decision, and all of a sudden the job site morale goes way through the roof. The same thing when we give ourselves over. When we lay down our offense, we let go of our revenge, we love our enemy, it sets you free. The second thing that it does is that it signals your allegiance to Jesus. Signals your allegiance to Jesus. When you lay down offense, let go of revenge, and love your enemy, it signals your allegiance to Jesus, both to yourself and to the watching world around you. When you choose to love your enemy, it is a choice that you make, and it's, for me, it is birthed in the reality that I'm a follower of Jesus, and it's what he calls me to. So when I make the conscious decision to love my enemy, it's reaffirming my allegiance to King Jesus, who is Lord of my life. So I surrender and submit myself to his authority. It's not something that I do naturally. It's not something that I want to do. It's just simply Jesus, I'm coming under your leadership and your lordship over my life. It reminds me of my allegiance to Jesus. And it reminds the world around me of my allegiance to Jesus as well. When you love your enemy, it makes no sense to the world who's not surrendered to Jesus. It makes no sense at all. It makes them sit up, it makes them listen, it makes them pay attention differently when you love your enemy, let go of revenge, and lay down your offense. The third and final thing is this: laying down offense, letting go of revenge, and loving your enemy. It shows off the power of God. It shows it off to a watching world. Jesus calls us into a life that is impossible for us to live apart from him. When he says to forgive and to love and to lay down, you and I can't do that on our own. We have to lean into the power and the presence of Jesus in order to see that accomplished in our lives, so it shows off the power of God. We show others what God is actually like when we love our enemies. I want you to think about that this morning and let that settle in. We show the people around us what God is actually like. Again, people have a lot of preconceived ideas of who God is and what God is like. When we love our enemies, we show the watching world what God is actually like. This morning, I want to play a quick clip for you. And in a second, it'll play here. And this is of Brant Jean, Botham Jean's brother. And Botham Jean was killed by Amber Geiger back in September 6, 2018. As the story goes, her apartment was right below his. Got off late from work, ended up in the wrong apartment, thought it was an intruder in her apartment, and she ended up fatally killing Botham. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and on her sentencing day, Botham Jean's brother, Brant Jean, had this to say to her. Check this out.
I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even behalf of my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
These are challenging teachings, no doubt. But deep down, you know they're true. Jesus invites us into a relationship.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Remember, validation is in the resurrection. Jesus can be trusted. He knows what's best. And what he lays out for us is the road to a restful soul. Would you stand to your feet this morning? Got a couple of takeaways, as we always have. Number one is this: respond to Jesus' invitation. Respond to it. Maybe for you, you're here this morning, you've never surrendered to Jesus, but man, this is very compelling, and you want to live a life where you can love your enemies, lay down your offenses, not seek out revenge. We'd love to share with you more what that looks like to follow Jesus with your life. Come see me afterwards. Talk to the person who brought you. They can share with you what it means to follow after Jesus. We got some friends that are going to be down here at the end of the gathering, and they're going to be there to pray. And maybe for you responding to Jesus' invitation is spending some time in prayer because there's some people that have offended you and you're holding on to the offense, and it's time to begin to let that offense go. So just respond to Jesus' invitation. Number two, carve out next Sunday to explore what Jesus taught about failure. Next week, we're talking about failure. This is what I'm saying. Carve it out. Come back. Join us. Failure is one of the things that keeps us from living this life that Jesus offers to us. So we're going to talk about that next week. The third takeaway is this: begin on your own reading the red letters. Our Bibles came in this week, which is awesome. They're out there on the information table. If you don't have a red letter edition Bible in your home, man, grab one for your house on your way out today. Crack it open. Start reading the red letters and see what they have to say. I'm going to pray and the band's going to play. Gives us a great opportunity to process what Jesus wants to do because of what we've heard. So, Father, do what only you can do. Challenge us and change us. Help us to live into this vision that you have for our lives, these restful souls. In your name I pray. Amen.